Well, good afternoon, everyone. Today, the topic is investments, uh, approaches, and specifically tailored onto the infrastructure of cable systems. So we have a set of panelists that are going to present themselves, and the idea is to try to draw some questions on what drives the cables and how it has an impact or how it is being generated by the demand that funnels the consumptions of capacity. I will let the voice to you, Rui.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all. My name is Rui Faria. I work for Angola Cables. And Angola Cables, as you know, is a whole carrier on the subsea industry.
Thank you, Rui. I'm Carlos Brito, and I've been working in telecom industry for over 20 years already. Most part of it's a supplier from different suppliers since Bell Labs, Lucent Technology, Nortel, Juniper Networks, and that was being my career. And now I'm with a company called Equal Networks that is specialized in automation for networks. So my pleasure to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jason Almeida. I'm with Cabo Telecom. I'm presently head of management and control. Basically, I make the bridge between the technical and the commercial sides of our business. And also, for now few years, I also run after money to fund this kind of projects, that expensive ones. So I think
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Kaburu from China Mobile. China Mobile is a mobile operator, and in fact, the largest operator in the world today, based out of China. 5 years ago, we started our business in Africa, and I'm happy to share insights around subsea cables investments that are happening on the continent today, and most importantly, partnerships that can be explored with the African operators. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, guys. So the idea would be if we can learn some things from those gentlemen. So there's going to be an address of different topics of cables and the investment behind, where it comes from, why it is being generated. Perhaps one of the questions that we can start is that we have here some people that works in deciding operational matters and also influence on strategic decisions. And my question to you would be if the strategic decisions that your company take or you as individual takes is on what basis does it take into let's say account problems in Africa? What are the main problems basically in Africa? And if you think that the investments that your company do answers them. So maybe we can start with in Angola, for example. I wanted to address the fact that you have invested in a lot of subsea. What is the caveats that you see in Angola, and if today your infrastructure answers it?
Thank you, Dylan. Well, in Angola, as you know, a few years ago, we had the civil war. And basic civil war as basic rip off all the infrastructure, all the telecom infrastructure, even roads. So basically, we had no alternative by rebuilding infrastructure. And rebuilding, we took the opportunity to do it with the latest technology available. And the governments, not this government, but the previous governments decided to put some money and starting to invest on infrastructure. So there was partnerships with the Chinese companies, there was money from the government itself, and then there are other monies that we have took it from the banks to build the network that Angola Cables today has it. This has provided to the country an opportunity to be well connected with the world and not be an island in the continent. but also has brought us an opportunity to see that in terms of regional role, we could make a difference. Because as you know, if you take South Africa out of the map, all the other countries in the regions had nothing 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Now they had it. So there was some investment put by the governments and by also the public companies, but also entities like the World Bank or European Investment Bank, they're starting to look at that. Well, that's worthwhile to put some money on that type of infrastructure, because it's going to generate knowledge to the people. So in the end of the day, basically, we started to have this money coming, flowing, and using that in our favor to improve our networks. So Angola right now, we have a diversity of operators from mobile to fixed and the wholesale as well. And this has put the company, the country on a different level. Angola Cables is basically, I would say, an arm of the country in terms of the global business, because contents right now are the key factor when we talk about international networks, and we need to bring contents close to our populations, our countries. And one way to do that is exactly to put this infrastructure in place. It's costly, yeah, most definitely, but in the end of the day, it pays off. It's a learning process. It's not easy. In some cases, we keep the debts in your books, and it's very difficult to clear those debts in your books along the way, because you cannot sell it at a price as you want. You need to look at on the market. You need to look at in terms of your end customers, how much they are willing to pay, what they want to do, if they are willing to grow. And this is a mindset changing that we need to put it in place as well. Fortunately, we have been reached at this stage where we have a variety of subsea cables, fiber optical cables, terrestrial as well. And all these combines provide us a capillarity of our network that give us the opportunity to deal with many countries and many companies in the world, and bring contents and bring knowledge into our own country, but not just in our country, in the region as well. Because right now, with that investment that we have done, we realize that, well, Angola is a small country. I mean, don't forget, we are just 30 million inhabitants. It's a very small country. How can we do more to justify the investment? And then we're starting to look at in the region. So right now we have business with the two Congos, with Namibia, Zambia, South Africa, Mozambique, and even Nigeria, which allowed us basically to repay the debts that we still had in our books. But again, is a long-term business. Okay, no one can think that by putting money on a telecom infrastructure they're gonna get the money right away. It's impossible. Okay, it's a long-term business, but we need to be resilient. Okay, so diversity, access to contents, and easy to access the simple technology like platforms or medias that we have can only happen with this type of investment. Without that, of course, we cannot move into to the next layer. But I don't want to talk only myself. I'll allow the other guys to give their opinion.
Thanks. So another case, Jason. Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
I was laughing because Mr. Ruiz said that Angola is a small country. And imagine Cabo.
Everything's relative.
Yeah. Guys. Okay. We must lower the bar. So I think we as Cabo Verde, we have I would say a great experience to talk and to make acknowledge of it, because we in this day and age we need at least 3 cable to serve the country. Okay, but we know that the investment necessary to accomplish this infrastructure is huge, and it results in the capacity that overshadows what we need inside. I would say right now we must have the capacity that would serve 20 countries like of the size of Cabo. Right? So this brings to Cabo the possibility to do two things: to serve its internal markets, and as well as to look to our neighboring country that have a very poor infrastructure. If this is true that Africa have a lack of infrastructure, it's more true for our region. I can think of 5, 6 countries that only have one cable built in 2012. So they need some resilience.
Question actually for you guys and for you, since you have a micro. Would you say that the way you design current and future cables is coming from the same source of investment that has triggered the ability to create the precedent cables like wax in the past? Did you change your mentality to access funds, and how?
This is a process, but I can say that we, as Telecom, we are incumbent, and the government, we are putting in place a different framework that will allow a market to be more open. Open access, carrier data matter center, that's the part, as it was, how we understand.
Micro.
Sorry. Yes, definitely. We are aligned with the government to implement in our island nation an environment where there's free access, open access, open carrier, and that's we fully acknowledge that's the way. Even we, as incumbent, we fully acknowledge that's the way that we must pay from the future. And this is a great opportunity for Cabo because, okay, we are a small island, we overbuild for our capacity, but at the same time, we can't reach to other countries and put our capacity, our data centers, our legal framework to serve these countries, reach some kind of the gap that they have now in terms of infrastructure.
Well, we can ask also to CMI, Kevin, how with your flagship cable to Africa, can you say that you are with this cable bring something new, or at least did you get the collaboration in a more modern let's say model?
No, it's a good question, and I do believe we come across it a lot. Couple of years ago, when subsea cables started being built in Africa, we were moving from maybe satellite connections into subsea. So the goal then was to connect more or less Africa to Europe, continental cables. I think as the ecosystem has developed, and from an outside point of view looking in, we've seen the need of subsea cables to be more intra-region, connecting Africa within Africa, for example. And this is something that we took into account significantly with the design of the cable like to Africa. So we've moved from a point of connecting Africa to other regions. Now we're connecting Africa within Africa, connecting countries that have not been connected before, and obviously bringing more and more people online. What does this do? I think we do say that we're getting to a data-driven age. So data is being used to make a lot of decisions, and data is driving the decisions also around traffic patterns that we're seeing today. So with the launch of To Africa, we believe 33 countries will be connected on a single cable and 3 continents in one on a single cable. So what does this do? It changes completely the traffic profile of how we used to envision cables 15, 20 years ago. And I believe countries that have not been online can benefit from being online now. Countries that are only online on single cables can have multiple cables. As we've seen, you can never have enough, as what has happened in West Africa recently. So it just creates more resilience. And to your first point of challenges that are being solved, it's about elasticity. If you think about what has happened recently, for example, we see that you cannot have enough resilience, and will continue needing more resilience to back up countries to remain online. So that's a value we believe we are bringing onto the continent as China Mobile. We're very focused on solving the gaps that exist today on the continent with partners like Angola Cables and others. So we'll believe that this will add a lot of value into the continent.
Thanks. Yeah, Carlos.
I would take a different angle on this conversation, which is from the supplier, right? Because
Yes.
the ecosystem is as complex as you guys know very well. It's not about only the subsys, but all the electronics that are behind the data centers. Well, they sometimes still part of this ecosystem is also made by still satellite links and things like that. So when we are doing those investments, what you're looking for is actually how you can leverage the investment to a point that you're maximizing every single dollar that you put into the network, right? So it's not only about that initial infrastructure, but how you can utilize that, how you can be proactive on your capacity planning, on your utilization of the resources that are into your network, to a point that you are maximizing, you're being resilient, as Kevin mentioned, and on top of that, you are also being proactive in terms of every single capacity planning activity that you're doing. So automating process, having visibility, having observability to your network, and being able to react and being on top of those movements and those trends is very important as well. So there are a few components of the investment that go beyond investment, which is how you utilize that investment, how you maximize the utilization of that investment, and how can you be proactive and taking most of the existing infrastructure with upscaling and bringing new technology to the table.
Okay, Carlos, I understand you provide a service called MAT automation.
Yes.
Can you explain what it is, and can you explain if that is a set of benefits that can be useful for cable, let's say, investment strategies, or is really a need to help operations from a company level?
Yeah, so that we call that a framework. So that framework is actually based on open source software. Everything that it has in that piece of software, that coding, is based on things like Python, Ansible, those open source type of software. So it's designed and thought to be utilized by any type of infrastructure. So it is something that you can have in a mobile network, in a fixed network, in a subsea complex ecosystem, and it goes above and beyond the network itself. As we look into other elements of the ecosystem, like OSS, BSS, right? All the billing part, all the services assurance part, and we coordinate those activities among all those subsystems in such a way that you start bringing from everything manually operated to a fully autonomous network, which is the vision of what we do. So and that is independent of the technology that's behind it. So we touch parts of the network, we touch parts of the provisioning systems, we touch parts of the inventory as well, and we start creating codes, right? Software pieces that are interacting all those different components of the ecosystem and make sure that is operating and provisioned and self-healing based on the network itself, based on the operations of the network.
Okay.
So that's the ecosystem.
No. Thanks for the bracket. So I'd like to go back and touch upon the one of the key component of infrastructure, which is the wet segment, traditionally the subsea, and the terrestrial portion, the backhauls. So we've got CMI that is proponent of cable, let's say, capabilities with To Africa, which is with no backhauls. And we've got two operators that have a mandate to commercialize backhauls. Can you share your views if the, let's say, the understanding of how markets and commercial models have been made, if they've changed with new cables? and the views of accessibility from a backhaul perspective has been reshaped in some forms. What are your views on that?
No, it's an interesting question. Conversation around subsea and terrestrial. I believe they are very complementary in nature. Whatever developments are happening on the subsea today are complemented by developments on the terrestrial. Case in point, I mean, East Africa, which I believe is becoming the next frontier of growth or hub in Africa, has started initiatives even driven by government incumbents and regulator to open up utility companies that build railways, build pipelines, to have fiber optic cables running along. And what this helps in is you offload your traffic on the subsea to the terrestrial that used to be more or less very choked at some point. So case in point, let's talk about to Africa for a bit. 180 terabits carried on the cable, and then coming into a country that has no terrestrial footprint or has very restricted fiber access. That means that investment is basically dead on arrival. And I think it's one of the issues that we are trying to lobby at different levels of policymakers as well as regulation and governments to open up more countries. There's initiatives like East to West, for example, where we want to bring traffic from the East Coast onto the West Coast terrestrially. And I believe as time goes by, the outages that we're seeing on the subsea will eventually be supplemented or complemented by infrastructure on the terrestrial cables that we can bypass some of the issues and benefit. I think from what I've seen in terms of development, there's still a big gap to go. There's still a big deficit on the terrestrial networks to catch up to where the subsea is in terms of being able to transit volumes of bandwidth. But there has been a lot of improvement. That said, we have to acknowledge that regulation is changing, that is helping with this. And I'll let my colleagues on the operator side say what they are doing on their side to supplement that.
Well, I can say in the case of Cabo, our regulatory framework already have changed. So, and as we already have a data center that is carrier neutral. That is not only Cabo Telecom that is present and is the owner of the capacity. We already have shared that landing in our station. And we are building that ecosystem as an open carrier neutral data center. So the framework are already in place. The market is no longer closed. So we took the step and we are looking ahead to receive more cables in the same fashion.
Actually, it's a question to Rui and you. It's on the when you look at cable initiatives, you look at the domestic demand, the wholesale domestic demand, and the wholesale worldwide. Can you explain how you categorize decisions with those kind of different influencing markets?
I would say that our first layer of decision in regarding to submarine sea cables was the resilience of the country, the connectivity of the country, but that has been served. So, but because we need to continue to invest, because right now we have two cables. One would be out of date in 10 years maybe, but the projects are starting to be implemented in our coast, and so we must take the opportunity and be present on those cables, and we can't make two things on one go, two folds. We serve the country in terms of resilience, but of course we are seeing the demand that can arise from South America, Europe, and Africa.
Going back to the first question, so subsea operators, most of them, they are some kind of obliged to become backhaul providers, just for one reason: efficiency. okay? Because they could not rely on the third parties to do the backhaul because it would take time, it would be costly. So in most of the cases, operators like us, we had to invest on the terrestrial part to get some efficiency and cost savings as well. So this is what we have done, not only in the Africa side, but as well in the Brazil side. Brazil side was a very great experience for Angola Cables because they open our eyes to see where you are on the market. There is a lot of competition, a lot of diversity, and you need to be efficient and fast in terms of action. And we basically become one of the companies in the world that was disruptive when we build a cable south to south instead of south to north, which is the normal standard. If you look at it in terms of Africa, all the cables go to the north, okay? It's very difficult to go cables going south to south. Now it's starting to come up. SAX was the first one. We are seeing Peace also doing on the other side, linking Africa to Asia, but there's nothing more, as a matter of fact, in the landscape. We talk about the same between Cameroon and Fortaleza as well, but it didn't pick it up in terms of commercials and economical viability. So when it comes to our local markets, for example, in Angola, we have different domestic cables operated and owned by different entities, okay? So we don't have anymore the competition of the incumbent. Basically, they lost their main role for many reasons, and because of inefficiency. Because if you don't have a company that is efficient in terms of designing solutions, finding the right frameworks, getting the right skilled people, and getting the right competences, you are not going to get the funds. And even if you get the funds and equipment, you are not going to be able to deploy it to monetize that investment. Okay, so in the end of the day, it's a cycle that traps most of incumbent operators in Africa. There are a few exceptions, absolutely, there are a few exceptions, but it happens to market to market. Markets in Africa are very well spread out, very different. Experience that I got in Angola is not experience in Cabo Verde or Senegal or Nigeria or in South Africa, but there are some common points that we share together. And one of the things that we share together is, can we do and can we make an operations with all type of infrastructure, being subsea or terrestrial, with the lower cost as possible, with the most efficient as possible, and easy for the customer to pick it up and make the deal right away, and not waiting 45 days or 60 days to be deployed? Even getting a quote today for a customer is not willing anymore to get a quote in 5 days or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. They want a quote today, right now. After 1 hour, they request, they want the pricing, and they want everything sorted out. And this is one of the challenges that we see also affecting African operators. If they want to be efficient and if they want to be a global operator, they need to invest on what? Process frameworkers, most definitely, okay? Automation. There's no other way to go around. You have to automate a lot of process. People may think, oh, but this means that we are not going to hire more people or we're going to fire people. No, that's not the case. There's a lot to do in telco companies that we can use the resource there is in-house. But efficient is one thing. When it comes, for example, to using the terrestrial fibers in Africa, I agree with Kevin. We need to start looking differently because subsea cables, they go around the continent. What about in between? We need to put money over there. It's costly, yes, but putting money, it doesn't have to be the companies that are on that specific country. I would like to see a company like CV Telecom betting and investing on a terrestrial fiber between East and West. Why not? It's possible to do that. We just know how to monetize that. We know how will be the challenge, and we should be prepared for that because nobody else is going to do that for us. Either the Africans, they do that together, or we're going to stay on the same landscape as we are today. But there are good things, okay? So even your company on the IP level, okay? There's a huge IP network in Africa that most people don't know about it, okay? We have a lot of countries that are connected at the IP level, with CDNs are available to anyone. where people can access contents easily on a specific country, but that content is from a different countries from a long miles ago. So I think in the end of the day, it's a challenge that we have to face and we need to embrace, because nobody's going to do that for ourselves in the end of the day.
Thanks. Now let's look at the domestic markets in each countries. In some markets, there's a lot of ISPs evolving and not necessarily touching upon the infrastructure that exit the country. In some other countries, it's not so much. Like maybe in some countries, there's no space to have too many operators. How the new cable initiatives are, how they are impacting that current distribution of operators in their own domestic markets. What are your views on that? If there is some thoughts to change the market, to help it, or it's just to help the investors to get their money back? What many influences have been, what changes can be said on the domestic market? If you can share.
Well, as you said, for the case of Cape Verde, as I'm seeing it, there is not much space really for other operators. So it remains to be seen, okay? But as Mr. Rui say, it all depends on efficiency that one can bring and make the investment make economic sense. But the market, it is what it is. It's something to remain to be seen at my perspective, but I don't think that can change in the case of Cape Verde that much.
Maybe just to supplement, from what we see is, if we look at the current design capacity of subsea cables, you would say we, as a continent, we have sufficient supply at this moment to deal with maybe the next 3 to 5 years. But this has not been the case. This is only because of new initiatives or new cables like Equiano and Google joining the investment. So we're seeing more collaboration with OTTs, CDN providers to fund these subsea cables. That is one. How it impacts the domestic market is, as operators, as players of the ecosystem, we need to start thinking beyond just the connectivity layer. And I think a few companies represented here are already thinking how to automate, how to go to the next level, which is the application layer. Giving you an example of China, for example, with a market of 1.5 billion people, they managed to monetize a lot of their cables. Today, most of the cables in Asia Pacific are filling out as soon as within 5 years of the cable being launched, it's almost full. Yeah. We cannot sustain the demand, for example, between Singapore and Marseille. It's a very hot route. But what is driving this traffic? I believe it happens in the domestic markets. It happens with automation. It happens with AI. It happens with IoT. I think we're yet to get to the point in Africa where the data has caught up to the drop in prices, because at this moment prices are dropping. But if you ask the operators, are they actually seeing value for the investment? It's still taking 10 years to recover your value on the investment. So we need to start thinking of content and how to monetize the data that we're putting on these cables. Otherwise, they are dumb pipes. There's nothing a cable adds if you don't add the content to it. So a few years ago, we were talking about data being the new oil, right? It's more valuable than oil. But if you ask me if data is the king, then I would say content is King Kong. I think it's something that we need to start thinking about. How can we, for example, put the content of Cape Verde with the nice African music on the cloud? How do we make sure someone in a village in Zimbabwe is able to access that content on a podcast, on the cloud, see the video, without that traffic leaving the continent? This is something we need to do to build ecosystem. And that's why the data center players come in, because it's all an ecosystem. Today, only 36, for example, data centers, carrier neutral data centers exist outside of South Africa alone. Yet, we want this content to remain in Africa. It wouldn't be possible. The ecosystem needs to move together, like what Carlos said. We have to move together as an industry where we are adding automation, adding new technology, adding new subsea cables, opening the regulation with policy and OPGW networks on the terrestrial to move together as a continent and develop.
Thank you, Kevin. What he just said is just, right on. There are many things happening right now. And one of the most important things, and I was talking to Rui before as well, the importance of having the content closer to the one that's consuming. That's going to drive a lot of things. So in the industry, they are calling, the mobile industry is calling that mobile edge computing, MAC. And that is actually bringing a lot of, small mini data centers close to the neighborhoods of big cities, so that the latency for the services are not permissive to the service itself, right? Which is happening in the metro areas, are going to replicate and grow, and it's growing very fast. It's actually exponential growth of data, and that data in the metro areas, the big cities, and they're actually compacting it and creating points of presence, aggregation points that are demanding new capabilities, not only in the subseas, less in Africa, maybe because of the economics of it, but also it's a trend of global trend that's going to impact Africa maybe less than 5 years. You said 5 years. I don't believe, maybe less than that. If you see the graphs of the traffic. And there is only way to do that. You have to build capacity and be efficient on the capacity that's built. And that's what my initial point is. But I see that happening. I see as fast as Kevin was telling, in Asia, being replicated in other areas of the world, primarily Americas and Europe, but eventually also picking up in Africa as well. That's my view.
Yeah. Let me pick up just on the contents, because I think is the key factor. Contents in Africa has not been produced in the same speed as been consumed. We consume a lot of contents from outside of Africa, but there is something that is changing right now. There is a lot of young people, a lot of startups that are producing a lot of contents. They are not visible. So we need to reserve a portion of our data centers for the startups, the ones that are not affordable to pay for the co-location or for the cloud, okay? Because if we do that, we're going to generate contents enough that are going to compete against contents from Facebook, Apples, and so on. Because Africans, they love their own music, they love their own culture, but most of those are not available for everybody. Sometimes you need to go find a needle on the pave to see where those guys are. So there is one initiative that we brought into Angola, okay, which is speeding net. It's called Acelera Net in Portuguese. We are picking up startups to become ISPs, but not any ISPs. They will become ethnic or local or regional ISPs with a driver, generate contents. If these make, let's say, if they do that, they will have a different source and not just trying to sell internet. Because I see Africa in the next 20 years, the internet being sold at a zero cost. Because the population in Africa is growing a lot. Just to give an example, in Brazil, the cost of internet in Brazil, when it comes to wholesale, it's below $50 50 cents a dollar. Basically, we are giving internet for people to use it. Africa is gonna happen the same. Okay, so the other source of income will be the contents. Okay, rights, for example, for singers, songs, and so on. That will be the generators of the income. So contents, in the end of the day, is something that is going to reshape the whole world. Is already happening in some continents, but in Africa not so much. But we're going in that direction as well.
Thanks, Rui. Interesting. Now, regarding to the CDN, you mentioned that CDNs are at the forefront of investments. Isn't it giving it away a lot of power on the infrastructure and how it is going for the operators who have traditionally been laying the cables? What is your views on the CDNs and their influence on big cable system designs like To Africa, Ekiano, or actually, yeah.
Continue. Sorry, but it's related. It's related. I don't see any advantage to get Meta, Google, or Akamai, or any others bringing their CDNs into our data centers in Africa. Okay, because in the end of the day, we all going to consume either being close or far, but it's not exactly the contents that most of our population is looking for. Okay, they do it because it's a trend. Why I should not use TikTok if my neighbor uses TikTok, right? So it's a trend. But if we bring it something different, we're going to reshape the contest, and CDNs are going to be different and are going to be assessed differently. We have this experience in Angola, but we have also seen the different situations in Nigeria, in Ghana, and also in Congos. Okay, they want to do whatever everybody in the world is doing, but it's not enough. They want to complement with something that is related to them, and this is something that makes the big difference in today's. So, why Facebook is building a to Africa cable to connect Africa? What's the point? Okay, they should work with the local operators to bring their contents to the local operators DCs, and making the local operators being the drivers of that growth. Because in the end, what Meta is bringing to Africa, in the end of the day, if they don't have, well, as you say before, who's going to be their backhaul providers? Who's going to bring that information, all that data into the country deep inside? What about the landlocked countries? How are they going to assess those? It's a trend that we see. We know what is the problem, and we have seen the problem, but nobody is working on the solutions. And everybody's looking, okay, should we invest more? Should we get money from, well, but the sources of investment, in the end of the day, they are telling you what you should do or not should do. And maybe it's time for us to start to rethink about what we should do or not. just a thought for all of us.
No, I'd like to supplement that. I think, I mean, I have a telco background as well. Just I used to be in the operator side, and there's a time we had a big debate with the CDNs saying, look, today Google, Facebook, most of these services are free to our customers, right? They are offered free because it's really about monetizing the eyeballs and having. But the operators are investing in the networks to keep these free services going, right? So today, your consumer was okay with a 3G signal. All of a sudden, TikTok is there, YouTube is there. You have to invest in 4G. 2-3 years later, you have to invest in 5G. But you're not getting any incremental ARPU as an operator for this investment you're making. Yes, so this is a real debate that has been there for a long time between the operator and the OTT and the content provider. And that comes back to what we just talked about. It's because the content is not sitting here. The reason the imbalance to the operator is in the deficit is because we are not generating enough content on the continent to reverse this scenario. So we consume, we download. Basically, if you look at the at the trends of data, we are more at download content because all the data is sitting in some data centers outside of our countries. But if we reverse it, and that's why I'm glad even the TV broadcaster, for examples, are here. If we reverse it and we are creating the content locally, then we are selling that content externally. And then we have the muscle to build the infrastructure ourselves. But at this moment, without an OTT provider, I think, injecting capital in the subsea cable, I don't think the operators have the enough funding to build the kind of scale of cables that are on the continent today. So it's something we have to address from a holistic point of view, from the local access to the metro, to the backwalls, to the content providers, to the subsea cable funding, to the policy. I think it's an ecosystem.
Yeah. Answer to your question, I have mixed feelings because I know the CDNs are coming. They are making the things happen. And we do not have in Africa the organization and the support to fund this kind of project. Okay, they come and sell as a solution. They impose this condition, and we still at the same stage that we were 10 years ago. But I hope things may change, and I would hope to see more local solution, more funded with local capital. Would be something that I would wish to be happening here in our continent, especially in these countries like our region that where there is a huge lack of infrastructure. Okay, and we will not so much dependent on Google or Facebook to come and impose type of projects that will not serve our strategic goal to have more content residing in Africa.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think that Kevin was, again, very fortunate in the way that he described the ecosystem, how things are impacting, and the value of having content creation close to your market for many reasons. One of them is really for creation, for generate value in your communities, as Rui was, which is amazing. The initiative that Angola is taking, it's really is for us to recognize and actually talk about it whenever have an opportunity. But there are other components that are driving this trend. Not only the CDNs, but also other killer applications that we're always looking for, the killer applications that with 5G, some of the markets that are already using 5G, and I live in a very fortunate market, which is the Americas, and there 5G is being used, heavily used. There are things that are really, generating new demands like self-driven cars, right? Things like that, where they are very reliable in they rely a lot on the network itself, and the type of latency that is allowed in the 5G is really, really low. And there is nothing to do with CDN, for instance, and it's driving a lot of investment for the reliability of the network. There are some verticals, primarily the manufacturing verticals of the market are using 5G a lot and actually doing private networks. So some service providers in the US and other markets are developing networks for private utilization, and that is also creating a lot of demand, and things like mining in some of the countries are using networks a lot for their operations and their automation of their systems, and that is another generator of capacity. So CDN is important. We spoke about the MAC phenomena. We also spoke about the value of content creation, not only for the network itself, but other means of value, right, for the community. But there are other things happening in the ecosystem that are impacting the trend here for capacity demand in the network, and CDN is one of them. It's very important, but it's not the only one. And there are also other components that were not even touched here in this conversation, which is like security, that we're just leaving alone for now. but are also important as the CDN itself, right?
Let's go back to CDNs again. 20 years ago, the main cables that were coming were mainly driven by the World Bank, if I'm not incorrect, or mobile operations you mentioned. So I think SAT3 was initiative driven by mobile operators. WAX similarly. Then came a few World Bank initiatives. I think the two latest, and maybe you can correct me, are coming from CDNs. Now, those initiatives are Pan-African in nature. Is the third round of the cable system evolution going back into this concept of regionalism? Is it the answer to tackle this low latency, maybe paradigm to resolve the African digital problem?
I'd say yes and no. I think for the foreseeable future, we will still depend on, not really depend, but we will still cooperate with OTTNs as CDNs to build infrastructure, because in terms of funding, I don't think there's any single telco, MNO, that can take on the scale of the infrastructure projects. I mean, this is not 15 years ago when data was as expensive, or voice minutes were compensating you. I mean, in 1 year, you could make a business model based on your voice traffic. But we know MNOs now are really struggling to even remain afloat, especially many incumbent mobile operators in Africa. So for the foreseeable future, I still see the cooperation of mobile operators and CDNs continue, just because of that funding deficit that is there for the subsea cables.
Just let me add that, because one of the key factors that MNOs are facing is because they have legacy networks, okay? And legacy networks, most of them, they are not attending now the requirements of CDNs. And one of the requirements is latency and quality of services. So today, yes, the networks now that are being designed, subsea cables and even fiber terrestrial, they are looking in terms of what is the shortest path from A to B to provide me the best latencies for the CDNs, okay? And this is open all over the world, not just here in Africa. And it's a challenge, because you need basically to design the whole project before you even go get an investment. And when you go get the investment to explain these to the ones that put in the money, it's a nightmare. They simply don't understand the concepts. So it's yes, I agree. It's a yes or no in the end of the day. Yeah.
And I mean, just to supplement, if you look at the recent cable cut, this affected all the cables that were initially invested from an MNO perspective. There's a lot of new technology that has come onto the market now, and especially accessible to the content giants, like SDM technology, RODEM, switching, WSS, that was not there 15 years ago. So back 15 years back, the designs were built on saving cost, because that was a big priority. That's why the cables are very close to the shores to save the cost of basically making the branches. But we've seen what happened in the Congo Basin and in Abidjan, for example, where all the cables were cut off, and the cables that are away from the shore, like Kikuano, remained up. That's a concept of thinking that was engineered from a California lab that would not be accessible to an African operator. So the collaboration will for sure exist because of this kind of issues.
Well, to add to that, I would say, in my opinion, I think we can see emerging some form of blending funding between CDNs and telcos, or even other players that are present in the market. And for that, programs like Global Gateway from European Union is important to give fund and to make that projects become alive. So I hope that's the way we will go. we'll see more partnership between CDNs and operators to make things happen.
Yeah, one thing that we don't see much in this industry is the level of consolidation that we see in other parts of the industry. So I don't know, maybe Rui, you know the answer for that, but that would be a way to accelerate some of the major high capital, intense capital projects that is coming up. So what's your opinion on that?
That's a good question, because this industry is so intensive in terms of capital. They don't give you time enough to think about consolidation. When you are about to get into consolidation, you have to invest, because otherwise you're gonna lose. Yeah, it's another cycle. Otherwise you're gonna lose the train. But in some cases where markets are matures, like Brazil, for example, it's much easier to consolidate your operations in specific segments of the markets, okay, and then move on. But if you look at Africa, we tend to talk about Africa as a single country. They are not single country. They are multiple countries. Every country has its own specificities. From a regulator perspective, to the morphology of the land, to rivers, to culture, to people, the language. And this poses a great challenge, because I don't see these as a barriers. I see a challenge to find the right opportunities and go there. And those countries, it's very hard to consolidate anything. I mean, let's talk about the RC Congo. Who is going to think about consolidate any investment in Kinshasa? It's impossible. You have to keep investing, because it's a market that is big, it's eager to get access to a lot of products and services. They don't have it now. And by the time you're trying to recover the initial investment, you're already doing the third investment already. So it's something that, and not only that, the technology itself is not helping as well. Remember, when I finished the SAX cable, the project of the SAX cables, we're talking about interface of 100 gigs. Today, we're talking about interface of 400 gigs. 400 gigs already. So it was in less than a decade. And where are we going now? Maybe someone will come up with a 1 terabyte interface, and how are we going to do it? Okay, so that is the challenge. So innovation is good. It poses a lot of pressure on operators, because suppliers want to sell the latest technology. And on the other side, you need to keep up, basically helping the market to grow and attending the market. And therefore, you need to keep investing as much as you can. And let me go to the data centers, because we talk about data centers in Africa. The data centers in Africa right now, they are not enough. Yes, we know that. But what are you going to keep it in those data centers that are being built there? None of those are going to be fulfilled in 100%. Okay? Because there is no market, there is no data enough to occupy those data centers. So what are you going to do with those? Some of them, they are going to be empty. And we already know that there are data centers in South Africa, one of the, I would say, the mature data center, mature country in Africa in terms of ITC. There are data centers in South Africa that are even 30% occupation, because there is no demand for that. Okay. And that is a challenge, because we need to generate the data, but the data cannot come from north to south, neither to south to south. They need to be generated inside the country. Okay, it needs to be local. Otherwise, there's no other way. When I say local, it's not always a single country. Okay, because when I talk about South Africa, I'm talking about Lesotho, Swazilandia, Namibia, Botswana, Malawi. So all these countries in the neighborhood, they all part of the same ecosystem. And this is what we're trying to do. For example, in our side, we're trying to bundle Angola, Zambia, the DRC, Congo, Brazil together, because then we become a big market. Okay, there will be a lot of traffic coming back and forth. We are lucky to have a Microsoft Edge in our data center in Luanda, but Microsoft was very clear for us. Well, if you want me to upgrade my co-location and bringing more racks into your data center, you need to prove me there is more traffic in the region. So we're going to have to work for them, because I want to bring it to my new data center, and instead of having 4 racks, I want them to have 12 racks, because that's how I'm going to monetize the investment that I'm going to do. So it's not going to be the end user, it's going to be my customers that are going to pay for that. So it's a challenge, it's a daily challenge, and it's not easy, because in the end of the day, you have to put money all the time. So we keep most of, I would not say most of our revenues, because you have to pay a lot of suppliers and debts and so on. But the big portion of the money that we keep left, we reinvest every year. And reinvest every year means that we are not going to provide salary raises. We are not going to provide new cars for anyone, right? We're going to cut our costs on travel to the events. We cannot be in all events because they are very expensive. So it's a trade-off, okay? Either you reinvest what you get it, or either you decided to have a good life and in 5 years you are run out of business. In the end of the day, that's the situation. Thank you, guys.
So basically, it's all come down to the money.
To the money.
Okay, we almost closing. So thanks. I think we touched some themes. It's a moving piece, so there's no answers. It's just, I think, going to be with more paradigms coming into friction. And thanks for sharing some tips. Yeah, go ahead.
It would be interesting to hear from the panel.
If there's some questions as well.
Audience, comments, supplements.
Thank you. Last part of the conversation here, we discussed traffic and the role that various institutions have to do in order to provide conditions for this traffic to be generated in the South. And my question is, what you see the role of the investment on the last mile and access network with new technologies as a way of generation of this traffic. In other words, if you look back in the past, you had submarine cables designed to provide voice services. All of a sudden, you had the fact of the internet. And most of those cables went away because they couldn't cope. Even fiber optic cables, like the case of Atlantis 2, because they were designed to another paradigm. Today, with 5G, 6G, and if the trend is equal as it was on 3G and 2G with price dropping down and population have access to terminals to access the network, you know, there was a boom in traffic that justified the existing cables today. So this next step on customer premise terminals, will that be the key factor to compensate for this generation of traffic within our continents? Because if we look to Africa today, other than mobile networks, we don't have infrastructure. And it's very difficult to go to homes with fixed infrastructure. If we jump over this obstacle, is that a possible solution for this?
It's a great question. Maybe I can go first. Now, the metros, as you said, and the ecosystem in general needs to mature. I think just taking an example of some of the more mature markets. When you speak about cloud, your customers understand what you mean. We need to get to that point in Africa where you tell a customer that you're on the cloud and they understand. I think many of the times that our enterprises are having the discussion on cloud in Africa, I mean, I'm just from Dakar, where I spent a few days, and ISPs still have server rooms in their office. Enterprises still have on-prem data. They need to move to the cloud to justify that metro access moving from 10 MB to 1 gig. You need to get to a point where your enterprise customer is not consuming a 2 meg link because everything is on-prem. They need to be consuming more data. That will justify your return on investment on that metro because you're selling volumes. Now, once you aggregate the metro into the backhaul, you can literally now speak of, okay, the network has grown to a point, there's a critical tipping point where the metros are consolidating or are aggregating traffic. Look at case of China, for example, and I'll use it as an example. I know it's completely different and the scale out there is different. China Mobile, for example, has 250 million fiber to the home customers, 250 million, GPON connected. It is a mandate and policy that every single customer, regardless of how far they are from their fiber, have a right of access. If you raise your hand and you're in a village in China and you need fiber, it's a mandate to wire that link up to you. It's just pure policy. That's how it operates. I think we need to get to that point where every single African has a right of access of fiber and can utilize that metro network. I think your point on how do we stimulate this, I think is a chicken and egg. And like Rui said, we have to keep investing. You cannot wait for when the customer needs more for you to start putting on the network. You have to anticipate this demand will happen, to some extent, even lower the price to incentivize them. And then they will start moving. And I think we've started seeing countries like Kenya, like Togo, like South Africa, get to a point where because most of the customers are going to the cloud, the volumes are now getting to a point where it's justifiable to keep investing. And then you can go to your financing partners, your private equity, and put in money in the systems. Supplement?
About the new technologies, the possibility fast deployment in the 5G, in which the backhaul itself could be for fiber, but then the last mile to the customer is very fast to deploy and with capabilities to provide service not only to the end customer, regular customer, but also business customers. So that approach would build up traffic and build up conditions for these companies today that don't have access to operate, and then satisfy the needs that we have from abroad for data centers, and also on the connectivity part on the cables itself. So the idea is, and my question was related, these new technologies wouldn't be a key factor to resolve the problem of accessibility. Because unfortunately, we all suffer from the approach that regulators have been having all through Europe. They killed operators in terms of capacity of investment, because they come to be these policies of smashing, margins. They don't have how to invest, as we pointed out. But today the problem is either you do a new network or you are working on the premise and then you don't finalize what is your idea of having high quality service contents, circulating, because you don't have the network itself.
But it depends on each operator strategy in terms of business strategy. Some operators will go, for example, it's happening right now, for satellite solutions, okay? Low orbiter systems, right now it's easy. Okay, but for who they are deploying that? For the remote village. But the ones that are living in the city, what's the point to put LOS when you can put fiber to the home, for example? It's always about the business strategy. For example, an operator that does not have mobile service, or they don't have, or at least does not attend the enterprise retail like us, we're not going that direction, because it's money that you're going to put in the ground that you're never going to recover. Okay. Either the government comes and basically provides you a subsidy, or you're not going to recover that money, even if they generate data enough. It's not worldwide, at least the way we see it. But for other operators, it could be an option. Most definitely. Most definitely.
No, yeah, my point is just what you touched very briefly. There are a few components there. One is really regulation, and we all are following the discussions that the OTT and the service providers are having. A lot of pressure in the European side of things that are trying to make the OTT to also help financing the infrastructure, because they are using it, right? And they are not paying, right? That's a discussion that's going on right now. And there is also the component of the scale, because if you think about, let's say, the United States, right? So how many service providers we have there? Major service provider for mobile, yeah, we have 3 or 4, depends on how you count it. So it's AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. That's pretty much it, right? And it's a country with 300 million people, right? And then you go to Europe, and then you go to a country like Portugal, for instance. Just pick one, right? Portugal is what, 10 million 10 million inhabitants, and you have Altice, you have Orange, you have how many operators for 10 million? Four for 10 million people, right? And then you take all the Europe and other countries in Europe that also have sometimes 5, 6 operators, 7 operators in small countries, right? And then you say how you do the equation there to make that happen. So either you have subsidiary from the government, or any type of government that put money into it, or have regulation that's going to rebalance the capital, the economics with the OTTs and the service providers, right? So those are the most important discussions.
And just to finish off on technology, I think you mentioned what is a technology, a role in it all. Today, for example, in China, 5G is not for the mass market. And this has been the case in many parts of the world. Operators are still considering 5G to be offering incremental value from the mass market perspective. That will not happen. A 4G user is content to use Netflix still on 4G. 5G is for enterprise. And we think we need to get to a point where, and we are trying it now in Lagos and other parts of the world, where we're working with operators for fixed wireless access, FWA. We're working to help them monetize their spectrum, help them take more applications using the technologies they're investing in for their enterprise customers, not for their mass market customers. There's no incremental value to a mass market customer for the new technology. You go to 5G today, we go 6G tomorrow, you don't need it. Trust me, you don't need it. Yeah. But your autonomous car driving will need it for sure. That's why it's a chicken and egg. Yeah, chicken and egg.
Yeah, perhaps we can all convene that Africa cannot look at other markets as much as it should, because basically the way the market is going is following a drive that is unique, because the geographies, the regulations, the demography is unique to every market, and it all comes down to how much money there is in the pocket. But one thing is for sure is that the demand is growing, and meaning that the operators are going to still facing different challenges. And at the end, what matters is, as you said also earlier on, sir, is to keep investing, whatever the cost. Then the decision to invest in this or that, or in that, or in this, is we'll see the results basically, and yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay.
Any other?
Yeah.
Any other?
Well,
Partitions.
Kevin, actually, they might want to go
We're
to
done?
the beach.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you for your contribution. I know my questions were not so easy, but it's just there's so many things to categorize, and it's fascinating. But thanks for the patience and for sharing your own history. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.